Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back. It is 12 after 8 o'clock, and we are now going to be talking with Chad Thomas. He's an organized crime expert regarding the death threats received by the Director General in the Presidency's office, and she is Phindile Baleni. Chad, a very good morning to you. Welcome to the program.
Good morning to you.
How seriously do we take such threats? I mean, I've seen a copy of that letter which has been circulating on social media. It's very, very poorly constructed. I mean, the language, etc., does leave much to be desired. And one wonders, but obviously the threat is pretty real. But one wonders with, a letter that has been written like that and circulated, how serious are these people? Or does that not matter? Is it the underlying threat that needs to be taken seriously?
So it's South Africa, so any threat needs to be taken seriously. Poorly constructed letter, leaving a bullet with the letter. It smacks of what we saw in the late 80s, early 90s in South America, in Mexico City, in Colombia, in Bogota, and in other areas where there was a form of state capture, very similar to what happened in South Africa. There was a virtual collapse in those countries. It was very close to failed state status. We've seen in Sicily where prosecutors, magistrates used to be threatened in very similar manners, and that led to murders. In fact, the turning point in the crime in Sicily against the mafia was when they assassinated the chief prosecutor and magistrate in Palermo after threatening to kill them. And it actually turned the entire nation's opinion against the mafia, who had always been allowed to operate very discreetly. So this particular threat is concerning. It's concerning because people can be so blatant. It's concerning because there's an agenda at play and a narrative, and it suggests to us that the presidency may know more than they're letting on in respect of information they may have received. We've seen whistleblowers murdered in South Africa. We've seen whistleblowers having to leave South Africa because of threats made against their lives. This is slightly different because she's not a whistleblower. She holds a very senior position within the presidency. And it's of concern to me for a number of reasons. First and foremost, it's a very senior person being threatened. Secondly, what does that mean for us as the average person in the street if people at that level can be threatened who have such high levels of security? You must remember that one of the biggest budget components within the South African police services is the VIP protection budget. We talk about the blue light brigades, we talk about the immense amount of funds that are spent on protecting our politicians and persons of importance within government, but we forget that there's victims throughout South Africa. If you look at the first quarter statistics of our murder stats and our kidnapping stats and our rape stats, it's very disheartening knowing that the presidency is taking these threats so seriously, knowing that they have capacity to protect their staff and their individuals, whereas we don't have that capacity. A study that came out after the unrest of July last year suggested that the state needs to cut back on its civil service, and we may be losing 24,000 police members that are active in terms of detective services and visible policing. And this is 24,000 that are not through natural attrition, through retirement or through ill health. This is 24,000 that they're going to be cutting to come in line with the repayment schedules that have been agreed to with the IMF in respect of loans that were made during the COVID period. So we're going to have less police on the street to protect us as individuals, but people in authority and people in power have these VIP protection units that have budgets. So as concerned as I am about these threats and how blatant people can be to actually threaten somebody that holds such a senior post, I'm as concerned about us as citizens being put in a position where we don't necessarily have the protection we need.
Absolutely. Just going back to the reference you made to South America, we're not very far off from their situation currently in our country. I know you referred to them in the 80s. What is it going to take as far as South Africa and political will is concerned, to turn the situation around, because we are on the brink of collapse. We have a very corrupt government system, corrupt officials, and even corporate sectors are very corrupt. What is it going to take us uh, to prevent us from getting there?
We're very close to being there. The Ukrainian war's been going on for just under 6 months. The death toll there is just over 4,000. The first quarter of South Africa's crime statistics reveal that our murders are in excess of 6,000 for half that time period. We are losing more people through murder in South Africa than we're seeing in an actual war zone. So we are very close to that particular state. When one looks at the murder for hire in areas like KwaZulu-Natal, where it's politically motivated, and it's not a party versus party, it's inter-party politics where people are murdering rivals for councillor seats. When one sees the taxi violence, when one sees the kidnappings, what's occurring in South Africa, we actually have become a mirror image of what we saw in the late 80s, early 90s in South America. And they were able to turn it around. Good governance was able to turn it around, bringing in political parties with willpower to make a difference, and politicians that were able to stand up against corruption were able to make a difference. So not all is lost. We're not at failed state status as yet. We have a functioning judiciary. We have a functioning democracy. But we are heading there fast, and we need a change desperately fast.
Okay, I'm going to be digressing a little here, but it is really tied in with what we're talking about in terms of um, Arthur Fraser blowing the whistle on Cyril Ramaphosa's, the theft on Cyril Ramaphosa's farm to the tune of $4 million in hard cash. Um, why is that playing out now? What are the repercussions of that? Then I also want to look at the issue around the arrest of the Guptas. Is that going to make a huge difference in South Africa if they are extradited to South Africa? So let's take that first issue regarding uh, the stolen millions on Cyril Ramaphosa's farm. Why did he not report it? How can we then as a country have faith in him? If the fish rots from the head, what hope is there for the rest of the country?
So it's a very concerning situation. We have serious legislation in place that compels the reporting of such an incident. We have reporting in terms of an act known as PRECA. We have certain reporting obligations in terms of POCA, and we have reporting obligations in terms of FICA. There's also South African Reserve Bank exchange control regulations, especially when it comes to Forex. So there's a lot in terms of statutory reporting that should have taken place. The president has said that because he reported it to a senior police officer in charge of his VIP protection, that he had done what was necessary. We're hearing stories, though, that the case was only registered at a much later stage, that the Namibian authorities had, in fact, identified suspects, identified assets purchased by the suspects, but nothing further came of it. It smacks of a cover-up that perhaps the president didn't want to create chaos or havoc, that somebody who's so well protected and has such a good security team in place can be the victim of a crime. Then, of course, there's the more nefarious aspect that people say, but why was there so much money being kept? Surely, there's a certain period of time that you have to convert Forex into local currency. There's an obligation to have had reported it to these other statutory bodies, which didn't happen. I don't want to speculate on why that did or didn't happen. The president is a very busy man, and perhaps he thought by reporting it to the head of his VIP protection services, that was sufficient. But it's caused a problem. It's caused a massive problem, because now with the arrest of the Guptas, people are saying that now is a smokescreen. It's a distraction, so that we now are not concentrating on whether the president may have erred in respect of what his responsibilities were. And also people are saying, why have so much money in this day and age where South Africa is so crime-ridden? Who goes to an auction with cash? We do EFTs. You can do EFTs with instant payments almost immediately. In respect of the Gupta arrest, this is great. South Africa needed that boost. The timing was horrific, though. This is why people think it's a distraction. This is why people are saying the timing was to take away the attention from this theft at the president's game farm. I don't think so. It's been in the works for a while now. And the timing could have been better. The optics are bad because of this other incident. But with this, it could be that change we needed, could be the confidence that needs to be reinstilled in the citizens of South Africa that there is going to be accountability for state capture.
Chad, you are a crime expert. Your thoughts regarding the Guptas being extradited to South Africa, and also the reason why the third brother hasn't as yet been arrested. We also know that the Guptas had lots of connections in South Africa. A lot of those people have fled, South African citizens have fled to Dubai and other areas around the world. Chances that they will be also extradited to South Africa, because I don't think, should the Guptas come and face the music in South Africa, they are not going to take the rap on their own. They're definitely going to take everyone with them. They're going to obviously finger a lot of people, and then people, politicians and big business people in South Africa obviously are also going to be fingered once the Guptas are extradited to South Africa. Uh, what sort of repercussions are we going to see if that does in fact happen?
Exactly what you said. We can hope that they're not going to go down alone. We can hope that they're going to name others. We have a strong NPA when they put to use, when they capacitated. We have a very good brains trust within the NPA. We were able to extradite Shren Diwani, and to prove to the courts in England just how serious it was very successful. Unfortunately, the case collapsed once it was back on South African soil, and he was able to leave our jurisdiction a free man. We have a full extradition treaty now with the UAE. It's no longer just a mutual legal assistance agreement. Interpol is assisting. So depending on the jurisdiction, depending on how strong the case is, they can oppose the extradition. We saw that happen in Australia with Roger Stratton a few years ago. He opposed the extradition in the Brett Kebble murder case. He won, and that has almost set an unwritten precedent where people don't want to try extradite people from Australia like the Bob Roffs or Tannenbaum, because Roger Stratton was successful in saying coming to South Africa was like the prison system was like a death sentence, because it's such a violent prison system. And in fact, the then Inspector General of Prisons, Judge Cameron, went on record with the Australian authorities and said, no, he'll be looked after. He'll be in solitary confinement. He won't be at risk. But the Australians still ruled against him being extradited. So there's always that fear that a person may not be extradited. We've had Stratton who wasn't extradited. We've had Diwani who was extradited. I think the two Guptas will be extradited. The other brother will be located. He will be extradited. There's a strong enough case. There's strong enough willpower worldwide. The whole world is looking to South Africa. The world has also invested heavily in South Africa, be it through the IMF and others, and they need to see us as a successful state, not a failed state. So we need to go through this process, this almost cleansing process of having people that were high up in this whole chain of corruption being held accountable.
That's very encouraging, I must say. My final question to you, you referred to the Diwani case, and of course the rumor mills are going, they in overdrive at the moment, and some comments going around is that although the Guptas will be extradited, hopefully to South Africa to stand trial, like Diwani, they too will get away with murder. Your thoughts?
The Shren Diwani trial was highly publicized simply because of the way in which the murder for hire came about, and the fact that there were witnesses that confessed, were given prison sentences. One has subsequently died in prison. So it was what we could see to be a prima facie case. The way the state presented the case led to an acquittal. The defense applied for a section 174 in terms of the Criminal Procedure Act, where they didn't have to present a defense. They said the presiding officer must make up their mind based on what was presented. Now, for me, this was a great injustice, because if the British authorities could release him from the British jurisdiction into the South African jurisdiction, it means that the NPA team that traveled to London presented a good enough case to allow somebody to stand trial in South Africa. They had to basically present a trial within a trial to show why this man was in all probability guilty. Whoever then had the case in South Africa dropped the ball. That's not going to happen with the Guptas. It's too high profile and it's too international.
Well, we will be following this very, very closely. Thank you indeed for your thoughts and your time on this matter this morning. And you go well. God bless.
Thank you so much, you too.
Chad Thomas, a crime expert, talking to us about obviously death threats against high placed government officials. He says that these need to be taken very, very seriously indeed, but government officials are very well protected. What about the innocent man in the street, you and I? Very especially in light of the fact that 24,000 police officers may become redundant due to a cut in the budgets. Very worrying indeed. 8:28 exactly. News and views right here on Salam Media. In a minute or two, we'll be talking with Matthew Parks from Kusatu.